I would say actually I spend the majority of my time convincing founders not to take venture capital money, and then even if they want to, then trying to like help them understand what type of dilutive funding is going to be best, because there's a difference between angel money and venture money and PE money. There's a difference, like you mentioned, even in the VC world, of the different types of funders, whether that's a lead, whether that's a follow, whether that's vertical specific or general. And like, I think when it comes to the founding journey, I can definitely empathize why it feels like any money, it will help us stay afloat, which is what we need right now. But also, I think that in the long term, the companies that get the farthest have the right people at the table. And sometimes that can be hard to hold out while you're building the right relationships.
Zach, welcome to this thing called the Fervent Four Show. I'm told this is episode 257. Always great to see you.
Allegedly, thanks. That was allegedly to the episode number, not allegedly that it's good to see me. I didn't want the viewers to think that there was, like, look, if I started wearing like a white shirt or like a red shirt, maybe they would think that like we're beefing or something. We should do that one day. Ooh. Yeah. We should, you know what? We should have done it for April Fools, but we didn't. Next year.
There is always next year.
Yeah. I think we're in year 6 of this now, by the way.
Which is really, really crazy. So yeah, started in 2020, so we're into year 6.
Some mistakes I've made in podcasts in the past is jumping to like be like, oh, okay, let's do more. And then it's like, I think that's increasing quantity does not always mean progression, I think, if that's the right word.
Yeah, because there gets to be a lot of pressure, one, to meet that cadence, to meet that the I guess it's the same as operating a startup. You focus on doing one thing really well, as opposed to you start spreading yourself too thin and you run into some trouble. Yeah, but I am looking forward to today's guest. I was thinking, I don't know, maybe that'll be the first one out of the chute, but I don't know. I know that we're all super busy, and I'm just trying to think how we met. I remember
wasn't it like TomTom or something like that?
It was a TomTom. Was that right?
And then I met her at a random elevator at Assembly, I believe.
Yeah,
I asked my Netflix question. She looked at me like I was an idiot, and I was like, "Oh, oops!"
I was telling you, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to meet Himalaya. She's coming to this event at the rooftop at Assembly." But that is 100% right. We met at TomTom last year.
Has it only been 1 year?
A lot has happened in that year, right?
Too much has happened. It feels like
TomTom?
Years. March?
No, it's in April. So matter of fact,
it's been 12
months. Yeah, TomTom's taking place right now.
Incredible.
It's crazy.
We've lived too many years in this one last 12 months.
I mean, do you find that in the VC angel world? Do you think that we are living in like the equivalent of dog years or cat years, that it's like 7 to 1?
I think so. I was just talking to one of my friends who is at Vamos, and we were talking about how there's like the actual work that you need to do, right? Like where you sit down, do the work. But then so much of that is just like the part of the iceberg that you can see. The majority of our work is like the relationship building and like the cultivation of the connections and the resources, and all of that, it feels like, happens before, during, after work. And sometimes it just feels like it expands the work so much. So
right. I tell a lot of people that I'm like, I spend so much time coffee, lunch, just establishing trust and relationships with people, and I'm sure that and please feel free to elaborate, but that then you meet founders and then they're like, hey, can you introduce me to so and so? It's like, I've been building this brand and this reputation this is year 15. It's just like, you've kind of have to go through my litmus test before I just throw your name into the mix. It's because I can't risk the brand or the reputation.
That's one
Right.
of the things I think most founders, most people do way too quickly. They're like on an introduction frenzy. And I'm like, nope, you don't get many of those from me because of just what you just said, Tim. Like, it's like that you just met someone. Okay, great. Like, I know nothing about you. You could be a serial killer, right? I mean, I know that's an extreme thing, but like you hear people that are like, just introduce everyone to everyone. I'm like, yeah, but who is that?
Yeah.
What's the reputation from that person? If you're just the person that's just like, oh, go talk to them. There's no quality control on there. And it's great if someone will introduce you to that person, but like at the same time, be cautious in there.
I think the other thing is that you can introduce someone to another person, but what is the effectiveness of the relationship, and what is the effectiveness of what they're trying to get out of it? Like, oftentimes I tell people, like, a lot of times, like, founders, of course, are looking for investor introductions, and we often talk about like this dichotomy between like a lot of evaluation versus not, and like how some founders, as we hear in the news, right, can just like come up with an idea and then they get funded. But I feel like it has to do with what you two are talking about with the trust, right? Like, if a friend came to you, if a family member came to you and they said like, hey, can I borrow the keys to your car? You would use the trust that you have with them and the relationship you've built with them as a proxy for like their credibility and give them the keys to the car. But if you have a stranger coming to you, then the vetting process is so much higher, where you're like, okay, what's your driving record? Let me see like proof of license. Let me see other things, right? I need to know like maybe there's a collateral to be able to ensure that the car comes back. And so I think sometimes people don't like realize fundamentally how important trust is to like getting the effectiveness of a relationship and an introduction.
Yeah, and I don't go crazy in the sense of like there needs to be a double opt-in in order to make the introduction. I mean, I'm not even worried about that stuff, but like other things that people don't necessarily realize is like, especially from the founder standpoint, it's just like every angel, every VC, they have a vertical, they have a stage, they have a thing that they're looking for, and it's just like, hey, you just don't meet that. This person that you want this intro to is not what you're looking for. So yeah, your thoughts on that in terms of how you approach that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say actually I spend the majority of my time convincing founders not to take venture capital money, and then even if they want to, then trying to like help them understand what type of dilutive funding is going to be best, because there's a difference between angel money and venture money and PE money. There's a difference, like you mentioned, even in the VC world, of the different types of funders, whether that's a lead, whether that's a follow, whether that's vertical specific or general. And like, I think when it comes to the founding journey, I can definitely empathize why it feels like any money, it will help us stay afloat, which is what we need right now. But also, I think that in the long term, the companies that get the farthest have the right people at the table. And sometimes that can be hard to hold out while you're building the right relationships.
How did you get involved with entrepreneurship? What was that first thing that brought you here today?
Yeah. Well, my wife and I are actually from New York, from the Northeast, and I was a social worker working in schools. She was a teacher working in schools. When we eventually left being a teacher and a social worker, we went and we were trying to figure out like what to do next. Number one, we really loved what we did, but it just wasn't making ends meet. We were nannies after school. I was a waitress on the weekends, and we still just couldn't make it work. And there was just a lot of red tape around what we could do, and just in terms of proactive change. And so we were looking for something that had a bigger impact and also could keep us having our ends meet. And so we ended up going and getting an MBA together. And it was during that time actually that I learned about entrepreneurship in a very formal way. And I know it sounds crazy, but when I learned about entrepreneurship as a career, that's when like, things kind of like lit up for me and the pieces came together, and I was like, Oh, Natasha and I have started 3 businesses. And I know it seems crazy, like, how would you not know that those are businesses? But I think that coming from the Bronx, coming from New York, we don't call them businesses. We don't call ourselves business owners. It was just a hustle, right? Like, it was just like something else to ensure that we were able to make ends meet. And so that's, like kind of like how I came into entrepreneurship, is actually not realizing all the bounds of entrepreneurship, and then learning really formally that anyone can be an entrepreneur, and also that entrepreneurship can take many different forms, but that you don't have to have $1 million. You don't have to have a PhD and an expertise. You can be iterative and figure out business ownership as you go.
Those military jets are so loud that they knocked something down at your office. That was crazy. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a cat. I don't know, but it sounded crazy. I'm the type of guy that just reacts to something that I hear or see, and I feel like you just got to do it. One time we had a guy, this is like episode 7, maybe. So way back in the time machine, some guy started mowing his lawn. In the
lawn
middle,
service.
His lawn service comes on, and in the middle of the broadcast, he just goes start screaming at the guy. You got to engage with the content that's
well, it's interesting because I can tell which way the wind is blowing, just in the sense of, so they're either going to go over my house or your office, so it's just the wind, because you take off into the wind, so they must be going your direction. I'll get them
into the wind.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, you need, so you can get the lift of the plane.
Huh. Okay, so thank you for that. I learned something new today. I would have thought you want the wind to
at your back. No, you need the headwind to give you the lift, and then likewise, but they will come into a headwind when they land. So when they get done doing where we're going, wherever they're going, Himalaya, they'll come over my house for the landing.
So sorry. Yeah.
No, that's all good. But
I'm
surprised you haven't heard that cliche, Zach. Like when you're facing headwinds, remember that planes take off into the wind. It's just in order to fly.
All the things you want me to remember. That's the thing.
you have a great memory.
You have like sales, and I guess that can only happen if it's coming towards you.
Yeah,
but I would think that they just have so much. I don't know if the word thrust is the right word, but like that they can get that anyway.
Yeah.
Because is that for all planes or just military?
Yeah, all planes, and that's why you typically have your 2 sets of runways going crisscrossing, so that if whatever way the wind is blowing, they can use whatever runway that they need to, versus taking off into a crosswind or whatever.
Wow. I feel like I'm learning so much from this episode.
That's what we do here. We are the true teachers of the world. The tags today are going to say aviation experts,
which is 100% not the case. So hopefully I'm not spreading fake news, but I am pretty confident in my, at least that basic aviation knowledge.
I think we should have a disclaimer that says anything that Zach Miller says, please fact check, because it's probably not true. As I almost broke something here on my
I feel like I need to throw something off my desk.
Okay, so you guys met about this time last year. TomTom is like a venture festival or something like that?
Yeah, it's a community grassroots type of effort that brings founders, entrepreneurs, arts, all that stuff together.
Okay.
It's too bad. Of all many things that COVID had an impact on, TomTom was one of those. They were really starting to hit their stride, and then they were forced to take a little pause. So yeah, this is year 2 to get things back.
The redo, step 2. Got it. And Himalaya, were you involved at all in kind of the business startup community down here at that point, or were you fresh into it? Like what
I think that was the big reveal with VIPC, right? They were getting ready to make that announcement.
Right. Yeah. So VIPC had selected a certain number of funds to receive SSBCI funding at that time, and so they brought in those 7 funds, the BFM fund included, to be able to be on panels, to be able to talk about the funds, to be able to interact with entrepreneurs. So I actually had a really great time because it was such a fabulous introduction, particularly to the entire ecosystem that exists even outside of like Northern Virginia or DC. And so I found, Tim, you're saying that they're just getting their stride back. I mean, it was phenomenal to be able to attend last year.
Yeah, all those memories are starting to rush back now because someone was like, "Hey, Tim, you need to meet Himalaya. Himalaya's in Hampton," and I was like, "Oh, reactors in Hampton. How can we, whatever?" And I was like, "Hey, we'll get you plugged in." And then there was that event at the rooftop, and I was like, "Hey," and then you and Rachel were able to attend that event, and then you two were off to the races, just meeting so many founders.
And Tim, we actually had that meeting where I think Aurelia had set up an entire ecosystem. I think they also have quarterly events, or maybe it's like virtual events where like
Yes.
all the accelerators or
Yep.
programs
The
meet.
Virginia Accelerator Network.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, that was, I mean, and they were all in the room together. So the power of collaboration that was in that room that day was incredible.
Where did you get your, I guess, how did you get the crazy idea of like, I'm gonna establish a fund? Yeah, I mean, like, I would, that's kind of a crazy thing to do, but you actually did it. So like, I really would love to know that journey.
Yeah, well, one thing that I will say that is prevalent about my journey is that I don't tend to plan every detail out, and oftentimes after I'm like, this is much harder than I expected, and if I'd known what I know now, probably would not have recommended it, about most things, but
Yeah, well, that's how I felt about my MBA. I was like, if I knew business school was going to be this difficult, I wouldn't even have tried it. But since I'm already
yeah,
halfway through semester one, I have no choice but just to keep on
yeah.
going through.
That's usually how I do things is it's like both a gift and a curse because I do feel like when I'm doing stuff, I'm just like learning as I'm doing it. So I'm probably doing things the hardest way possible, but then I end up doing a bunch of stuff because I'm willing to try without having sometimes any, but definitely most of the pieces together. So I think the venture fund was very much the same. I mean, I did get my MBA, and so then I got that business degree. I actually, when I was going through the MBA program, I was like, I don't actually know if this fits me. Like I'm a social worker, I'm an activist. Like, what am I doing here in business school? And it was only when I learned about entrepreneurship that those two kind of things clicked, where I was like, oh, I can be an activist within business to be able to help more people utilize entrepreneurship in a formalized way to be able to like create their own economic mobility. And so I think that's like the thing I got out of the MBA. And then one of the things that I like was exposed to was there was a fund associated with the program that I was able to be a part of. And, that was my first foray into venture capital. Someone actually, the reason I got into it was because I was still doing a different business, and the entire like MBA program and cohort was like involved in it. And they were like, oh, you should get venture capital money for it. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Is that like a special kind of loan? And they were like, oh, there's a fund. You should go talk to them. They're associated with the university. So I went, and I actually didn't ask them for money because I didn't know how I was going to be judged because I didn't like, what is the grading rule, right? And so I was like, I just went to them and I was like, I don't know much about venture capital, but could you let me like sit in on when you evaluate a company so that I could understand how that works? And, eventually it took a lot of like trust and stuff, but eventually they were like, sure, why don't you sit in? And also, we're going to send you out to like go bring some companies into us. And I remember going there, and I actually went to Pasadena because I had my MBA I got my MBA in Oregon. So I was down in Pasadena, California at my first angel meeting, and I was mistaken as the waiter, a couple times because I definitely was looking very different than the majority of people in there. And then I'm sitting at the table, like feeling all this imposter syndrome, and a candidate pitches. I remembered in my head, the people at the fund were like, do not get enamored. We have a 95% failure rate in the startup world. Like, don't don't embarrass us. Stay very cool and calm. And so I did. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just act very cool, even though I was like kind of excited about this deal. And I turned to the person next to me and I was like, oh yeah, what do you think? No, I know it has like a large failure rate, but like, what do you think? And the guy turned to me and he said, yeah, like I'm okay with it, but I think I might put $25,000 in. And I thought I think that like blew my mind, because I had come from the humanitarian world where I had spent the last like 9 months battling against like the school and the city and like all these budgets to get $6,000 to
Right.
spread out across 43 students that I had. And for this person, when I'm hearing that there's such a high failure rate and it's so high risk, to have the discretionary income to be able to put in 25,000, it just made me feel like, for me, that like put it together, where I was like, there's so much opportunity here if we can connect them to different resources and to different people. And so I think that's where the idea was born from. There's a lot longer of a journey into like going from that to actually launching the fund, including me working at 6 different funds, then being a fund manager of like a small economic development fund, then, kind of putting the pieces together. But that was like the initial idea.
I didn't even know Tim when I'm with what I'm about to tell you, but like, this reminds me of Hatch Days. So you didn't know me then, Himalaya. So I was putting on these events, kind of like a startup weekend called Start Norfolk, and a bunch of other like industry focused like meetups. And at Start Norfolk, it was like build a company in a weekend. 180, I think like 180 people showed up, like 40 ideas. And it was like, wow, this is really interesting. But these people have 3 days. What would happen if we could work with these companies, give them a little bit more money? What could happen? Accelerators really weren't a thing yet. This is like 2011. And so like that kind of started percolating in my brain. And I was like, cool, like maybe I can raise some money, give it to these people. Trust me, I was not the right guy for the job, but I could like, I think people were like excited. Right. And so they're like, oh, like, there's this guy, young guy at the time, really getting behind this, kind of making the word startup cool in our area. And so we raised a little bit of money. We did 3 funds, like 10, 15, $20,000 checks, not a ton. Took a little bit of stake in each company, but like just hearing your story about like maybe not imposter syndrome, but just like, yeah, you just got to figure it out, because
Yeah.
you could
Well,
know
it's
everything and
interesting.
you just, well, I remember like I was getting meetings with people that were very wealthy, like the top guys and gals in the area. And it was like, I just remember really early on saying something like, well, I'm going to lose your money. And they're like, we know, but like, here's 10 grand, here's 20 grand, whatever. And so like, kind of like what you just said, like there is something crazy to me about that. It's just like, okay, you're going to lose this money. And in some cases they did. That really hurt my heart. Right. I remember like one of the times I had to like tell everyone like, yo, we're closing. This isn't working. Like here I am crying, telling them, writing the email, letting them know this. And they're just like, cool, we appreciate what you did. And I'm just like, okay. Like I just lost you guys a ton
Yeah.
of money. And
Well,
you guys are like,
it's
well,
interesting though, right? Because I mean, it's a power law thing, and so one of the 99 other checks that they wrote, they may have hit the power, they may establish that power law, and they're like, all right, I returned my individual fund personally, so I'm good.
yeah.
Is-
One of the things that you actually mentioned that I think is like really important to highlight is like, and I was thinking about that because I forgot about it actually, is within the journey, sometimes you like do the thing you intend. So, like, yes, this fund was successful in like launching and being a fund. I actually had like one like formal, two like when you count informal, like false starts, right? Like I tried to raise a fund before when I wasn't like as ready, right, as equipped, and it didn't work, right? Like I tried to do it with a few people, talked with a lot of people, and they were like, "Why would we give you money? You just like got an MBA. You have no experience in this." And I was like, "Yeah, but like, here's the idea." And they were like, "You like this." I remember a professor of mine who ended up being like now one of the first checks in, he's on the board. He was like, yeah, but like what would make entrepreneurs want to come to you? It can't just be money. It has to have like some level of expertise, some value you can provide them beyond the capital. And so anyway, he set me down a path of like, you got to go work somewhere. You got to go learn more things. You have to build some like, tool set that you can bring to the entrepreneur.
To me, I think it's like momentum. Like there was this momentum that had never happened before. Like people talked about business in the area, but I don't think there was ever like this grassroots real like style of like young individuals getting behind it. It was always just like, the old white guys that are like, oh, we need to do this. And it's like, okay, now here's this young buck that's like 25, 26, has got a little bit of momentum, right? He's in the paper when people read the paper, like he's in the paper every week with something new and people are getting behind it. And so like there was this momentum there, and it was exciting. And, I like to think that for a couple of years, we made Granby kind of a fun, Granby Street, a fun place. Not to say that's not now, but like there was a nice little swing where Granby and Main Street hit, and miss those days sometimes. Very chaotic. But yeah, it's, you gotta reflect sometimes, look back and be like, oh yeah, I guess I did do a decent job of getting people excited about this. So it's exciting to hear similar roots for you. I'm excited to see you continue this success. This isn't the end of the conversation, by the way. I don't know why I'm like asking.
No, but it's one of those things that it's really interesting in terms of like that I really appreciate about you, Himalaya, is just like, like when you were the new one sitting at the table, you just have that welcoming spirit to you that, and maybe you pass it on because of how you felt when you first sat at the table and you're surrounded by people that were writing checks of numbers that we never even could imagine. Because I know I experienced the same thing. I was just like, at the time I'm in a Zoom meeting and everyone goes around and they talk about the check sizes they typically write. And I'm just like giggling because I'm like, I could, oh yeah, my check size is 250 to 500K. So yeah, we can go up to $1 million or $2 million. I'm like, why am I here again? But it's just like, you just gotta embrace it, I guess, and then welcome the next people. And I'm still miles so far away from even coming close to even thinking about checks of that size. But like, is that something that you just got numb to, or you just, hey, I'm going to play the part, does it still pinch yourself moment?
I think that it depends on what room I'm in, right? I think that as you, just like with any level of entrepreneurship, Zach, you talked about like how you're like, oh, nostalgia about like some of the other days, but like it was chaotic, but it was good. I mean, every level has its own chaos, but also every level opens the door to more levels. And so I think there's always a room that I'm going to feel like an imposter in. But I will say, after you build, number one for me, like a core like set of skills where you can feel confident in that. But then number two, I think people overlook this, a core set of people that you can be real with, that like, a lot of times in entrepreneurship and especially in venture capital, there's like the superficial like highs, lows, right? Where like people want to work with you when you're like Zach and like on the, cover of a magazine or a newspaper. But like there's like a superficiality to like wanting to work with who has the most momentum at the time. I think after a while, you start to build like, 3, 4, 5 people who are colleagues who you really know that you can trust, who will be with you. I think when you have both of those, you have people you can trust and you have skills you can trust in yourself. That's when you can start, I think, changing the narrative. So now in a lot of places that I go, I'm controlling the narrative, right? Like where I am setting the tone for the conversation. I'm setting the agenda for what we're going to talk about, how we're going to talk about it, who else is going to be in the room. So I think that I've shifted a lot of that, where a lot of times, like you mentioned, when I'm in rooms now, I'm the one that's bringing people in. And so then it feels less of like that imposter syndrome because I'm setting the table. But you're never going to have that, 100% of the time. There's always going to be rooms where you're the minority in it.
Tim, you probably have had this too, but I remember like it with like specifically for like Hatch 2 and 3, I think, which would have been 2013 timeframe. Some of the investors that we had were actually like coaching me up and like mentoring me on like, here's how to get this person on here. And so we would like literally pitch practice going through this. And so like I remember like Randy Webb, formerly of Signature, I think they got acquired or something. I don't remember what it is. Tim, you might remember him.
I can't remember the new name, but yeah.
So I was like, well, I want to get Dubby as an investor, Dubby Wynn. And he's one of the guys behind the Weather Channel and stuff at Dominion Landmark and all that stuff. And he's like, well, let's get the meeting and let's practice. And so I remember I asked Dubby for $250,000 and he literally laughs in my face. But then literally he's like, I'm not going to write you that check. But we had the conversation and kept talking. And a couple minutes later, he did write me a check, significantly smaller, but I still appreciate it. But it's interesting that one of the the other investors was like, let's walk through is how, like, these are this type of things that he's going to ask you. And I just look back, reflect and say, that's pretty cool that someone would have that kind of trust and faith in me, that not only was he giving me money, but helping me get other people's money too, was a pretty cool thing. And that relationship thing is, I think people take that for granted, right? It's like, oh, relationships are easy. It's like, no. Like, let's go deep on these relationships and get strong with it.
I think it's really easy for founders to just lump all investors or sources of capital in the same group of people. Like, oh, they just don't understand. They don't get it. But what I'm going to do is totally different what everyone else is doing.
Or just look at it as a check and not like a deep, right. What else could they help with, right? That could be far more valuable.
Yeah. But I would agree to your point, Tim. Like, there are so many different types of funders that are going to have different motivations. Their check sizes are different, but their motivations, I think, are really different. And it's so important and critical to know what type of money you should be getting. Like, to your point, where I think I hear this often is like, when you get a no, it's like, oh, well, they just don't understand me. They just don't understand my product. One of like the biggest things I do, like, and now when talking to accelerators, is explaining that like 10-year horizon of the life cycle of a fund. Particularly if you're getting, like, this is the difference, right? Like, if you get money from an angel, that's their own personal money. They can hold on to those assets indefinitely, theoretically. They don't want to, but they could. But in a venture fund, they legally can't, right? Like, we're only setting up closed-end vehicles. Now there's like other, things with like, evergreen funds, but like most funds are closed-end structures. And so it's going to have a definitive start and a definitive end time. And at that time, if we haven't recouped money back, which, if you're doing equity only, the only way to do it is if you change ownership of the company and we get a portion of that sale, then we just have to write it down. Even if you're making, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million in revenue, that's awesome for you. But I have to go back to my investors and say, like, yeah, we have to write down this investment, and we have to zero it out, or I have to sell the shares on a secondary market to get pennies. And so I think that, like, foundational knowledge about how funds work is not public knowledge. And I think that creates a lot of mismatch and then mistrust between founders and funders.
I agree. And even like before then, even getting to that stage, it's just like, we talk about this on the show very often, but it's just like the time to need a banker or the time to need an investor is months and months before the time that you actually need it. And people just have this misconception like, oh, an angel is going to fall out of the sky. They're going to rain this money down on me and they're going to come and rescue me. It's like, it's not an angel because they're rescuing you per se. You have established these relationships months in advance. And so like your first meeting, when you talk to an angel and you tell them that you have 1 month of runway, or a lot of times even less than that, it's like, that is not the relationship. That's not how things start. That's not how things work. You have to plan that out 6 months before you even have that first meeting to know who these people are and what types of checks that they're willing to write.
Yeah.
And that super early education that has to go on from the founder level. And I get it. And, so what conversations do you have with early stage founders when it's just like, hey, where do you think this is going to go? What is the direction that you want to take this? How do you guide them?
A lot of what I do initially is to be able to explain the differences, right? Where we talk about, like, one, what does your success metrics look like, right? Because a lot of times people are building something because they think that it doesn't exist in the market. They want to be able to do something super innovative, but then they also want, like, a lot of people are like, this is my passion, right? Like, this is something I want to do, like, into the foreseeable future. Um, and especially in the early stages of development, you're just trying to get it right, and so you're still being iterative. You're still trying to figure out like what works. A lot of founders that I meet are still throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks, which is awesome, right? And it's great. You're using customer feedback to determine. That's great. And also, it might not be the time for you to get venture capital money, where as soon as you get it, there's a time clock on it between then and when you need to exit. And so we have a lot of conversations around like, where are you actually at in terms of your stage? What does your growth trajectory look like based on where you're at right now? And three, where do you want to go? Because oftentimes I find that there's a mismatch there between what the end goal looks like and what like what we need as a venture fund. And that doesn't mean that there's not other forms of money and funding that won't be a good fit, but I think that's like fundamentally the first thing that I do is like, also, what do you need the money for? So I have this deck that I use that goes through all the different types of capital construction points. So like when you think about ideation, when you think about product development, when you think about launching that into market, all of those different points, scaling, have, yes, different capital constrictions, but they also necessitate different types of capital. So I think matching the right capital with the right stage and what your long-term goals are. A lot of people want like something that more so resembles an acqui-hire rather than an actual like entire brand acquisition. They want to keep running it. And so anyway, those are a lot of the things we talk about.
It is just stunning. Like an infinite number. I mean, I don't even know if you can quantify, but it's an infinite number of things that can go wrong within a startup. And so the odds are so stacked against you. I mean, every layer is so challenging. Why
Yeah.
doesn't even my props for all the crazy people out there that think that they're going to be the ones that do it. But boy, it really is like capturing lightning in a bottle when you do get it right.
Can you do that? Can you capture lightning in a bottle? Is that a thing? Isn't that what they do? Wasn't there a movie like Sweet Home Alabama where they actually do catch that? They go to the stand and I love chicken flicks. I think you can catch it. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna look that up later. Okay, so something that I think you guys have both kind of loosely mentioned, but it's like not every business is investable. And I think founders need to look at that and be like, this is not a personal thing. They're not looking at me like, oh, my business is this. It's like you don't have that kind of multiplier that these type of businesses are looking at. You might be investable, you might not even be or you might be bankable, right? But it's like and I think people get really, really like emotional about that. They're like, oh, I have no like opportunity for me because people don't want to invest in my business. It's like, this isn't about you. Like there is this like portfolio of styles that people want. You don't fit into that. That's nothing against you. That's just like it's like dating. You got to figure out who you like and then you go into it. And so it's like, I know Tim deals with this a lot, and Himalaya, you probably do too, but it's like people are like, well, why? And it's just like, it doesn't fit. Like, sorry, like you have a mom and pop retail shop. There's nothing the matter with that. But it's not something that is going to see the multiplier in the way that I think maybe they see it. And they're just, you have a cap on your business. That's okay. But it's not something that's going to return something to you, 20, 200, 3 million X.
And I think that the other thing that it's totally okay is like, if you can establish and you have a $200,000-$300,000 a year lifestyle business, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you. Maybe you don't need capital.
So two kind of points on that. One, there's Zach, like on that note of knowing how investors are potentially going to evaluate your company, there's a video that you all can put out. We put together a series of free educational videos for founders. One of them talks about the 4 pillars, and that's just like a quick overview of how you're going to be evaluated in a dilutive funding way. And so it talks about defensibility, scalability, exitability, and team, and kind of goes through each of those pillars. So that way, when you're thinking about like, am I a fit? Am I a fit for even dilutive capital? Let's not even talk about open-ended versus closed-ended vehicles of funding. Let's first see if this is even a fit for what investors will want when it comes to like the ROI, when it comes to that multiple. So that I will say that that is one resource that is available, that is free, that people have found helpful. So that way you can even determine if this is what you want to do, if you want dilutive capital. To Tim's point, I think that the majority of companies actually don't need or shouldn't get venture capital money. It actually will change your growth trajectory. It'll change what your success factors look like, and that might not meet what you want. If you want a $200,000, $300,000 business annually, that's phenomenal for you and your family. And if you get investor money and they're expecting you to sell when that's not actually what you want to do, because you'd have to grow a lot bigger in order to be attractive as a candidate for acquisition, then like that's not what you want. A lot of people talk about generational wealth building, sure, from venture capital, but there's so many ways to build generational wealth, and a lot of that can be business ownership that then is passed down from generation to generation. It can be building a larger community base and involving many other stakeholders in your community that then creates an asset that then is passed down. So I will say like that is like the another thing that I think is like not like you don't get on the front page of Forbes having a $200,000, $300,000 business that has that recurring revenue, but that is a really great lifestyle for you and your family. The other thing that I just wanted to quickly mention, and I know that Tim, you know this, I tend to nerd out when it comes to these things, but this is something that we've been exploring as well, particularly on the nonprofit that I've been running, and then figuring out how to integrate that into the venture fund in like a fund too, is what does integrated capital look like? So I'm in a fellowship called JEI. It's a Just Economy Institute. And we've been talking a lot about how venture capital is like this like proverbial glass slipper, where like you're going around, Zach, to your point, people get really upset when they don't fit the glass slipper, but the glass slipper already comes predetermined with specific criteria of what we need to have in order to meet that. And instead, we've been thinking about what does an integrated capital stack look like, where we could meet founders in a different capacity and be able to think about like, okay, you as an individual and as a company could use a mix of debt and grants and crowdfunding and equity, and how do we help you build that model so that way we can meet founders where they're at. Maybe it has no equity and it just has debt, right? Or like maybe it doesn't have debt and it has grants because it's super early on. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like, and there's so many amazing organizations like Boston Impact Initiative that we're taking a lot of cues from, of how to build an integrated capital stack so that we can bring it back to Hampton Roads.
I really I dig the glass slipper analogy, because you're right. Every investor's thesis is their own individual glass slipper, and it's just like you just don't have the right foot to fit into that slipper, and it doesn't mean that your foot is wrong, but it just doesn't fit into that particular slipper.
Shaq has really big feet, that's what I think about.
Exactly. And he had to find his own glass slipper, or he had to, instead of finding a glass slipper, he had to go and make his own shoes, right?
And sell it at Walmart and become like, that dude's really smart, by the way.
Right.
Just your thoughts on like women and minority owned businesses and all of like the data that says they aren't funded the same way. Is it just because the style of businesses that a lot of these are not venture business? So maybe there's context is missing. Is it that they're the same kind of businesses? Because I feel like a lot of times headlines are very skewed without like the true real story behind something. And so just like, what are your general thoughts on statements like women and minority owned businesses are not invested in the same way? Just thoughts on stuff like that?
Yeah, and I will say again, this is a perspective of one, right? And so take what I'm saying as like an N of one and not like as a large generalization. I know only my experience as well as like the things that I've been able to read and see. But in general, I think it comes down to two factors. One, certainly, I think that people start businesses with what they know, with what problem they are seeing, and then they try and create a solution around that. A lot of times, minorities or women are setting up businesses that are going to be more product based, that are going to be more lifestyle based, so that certainly is one. However, I think you can find anyone doing anything, right? And so there are many minorities and women who are in like pure tech or like med devices or other aspects. I think the other component comes kind of full circle back to our beginning point is people actually like will give you money if they trust you. And I think sometimes we place such a heavy emphasis on like how good or bad the idea is. But most funders, if you ask them when they're investing super early stage, are investing in the founder and therefore are trying to understand like how much they trust the founder. And so I think that's where minorities and women kind of like are at a disadvantage in that way because they don't necessarily have like a lifetime history, a family friendship with people who have discretionary income that would then support that, right? And so I think that, and I don't think that's just for minorities and women. I actually think that there's a huge divide in the working class between the people who are working class and the people who are not, right? And I think that across the board in rural communities, there is so much excellence. There's so much innovation. I actually worked when I was living in Oregon at a program called Invent Oregon, and it like highlights all of this innovation, invention-based innovation in Oregon, mostly coming from rural areas. And there's like absolute brilliance there. And the same thing happens where they don't intrinsically know people who are their family friends or people who like really really trust them who also have the discretionary income, and so then they lack that like initial infusion of capital, which then has a snowballing effect, right, where people are like, oh well, has anyone else invested in you, as a marker of credibility to then be like, I'll invest in you, right? And so I think a lot of that comes from the foundational networks not being there. I think there's a lot of people who are trying to change that, right? A lot of people who are trying to decentralize funding structures. So I will say that. The other component to that is that even though when we look at like the headlines are minorities and women don't get funded, that's specifically in venture capital. That has nothing to do with the number of businesses that minority individuals, women, people from rural areas, the number of businesses that they're setting up, or the number of businesses that they're setting up that are sustainable, that are successful, that are profitable, that are doing well. Like we kind of hear it like, I feel like all media likes to sensationalize stuff and dramatize stuff. So they focus on one aspect that then makes you feel like, oh, that's, it's like all doom and gloom. It's in one aspect. And yes, there's a very clear problem there, but also venture capital doesn't determine the success of entrepreneurship as a whole. You can still be really, really fundamentally successful as a business owner without ever getting venture capital. There's many other types of capital, and there's like innovation, right, that can be created and iterated upon that can create a successful business. And we see that all the time across minorities, women, and rural communities.
I'm curious, a couple of part question. How did you land in Hampton Roads? And based on all the things that you've learned through Oregon and growing up in New York, what are your plans and what do you hope to bring to Virginia as you continue to push ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So, how we got to Virginia. So, my wife and I moved from the Northeast to Oregon, got our MBA. She got her JD as well. And then we moved to Minnesota when she got a job there. And then we wanted to be actually closer to our families who are all on the East Coast. The reason why we came to Virginia was actually because my wife's first teaching job was in Hyattsville, Maryland. And so we have a lot of family and a lot of community in the DMV area. one of the things that I feel like is similar between a lot of the places we've lived and Hampton Roads in particular, which is how we ended up here, is that it's a place that is like a burgeoning ecosystem. And I think that's what really excites us. You know, a lot of people want to be a big fish in a small pond and be able to, you know, like dominate a particular market. But I think for us, we love learning, we love creating, we love building. And we find that the greatest innovation comes from places that aren't necessarily like the places that people are referencing, like New York and Texas and DC. But you know, like for us, we love community-based entrepreneurship and we love innovation and invention-based entrepreneurship. And so we find that here. And so that was one of the things that we were looking for. And I, for one, have like absolutely loved living in Hampton Roads. We lived in Northern Virginia first and then moved down here. And I think for like the future and just thinking through that, one of the biggest things that I kind of mentioned is like this divide that's within the working class. I think that I fundamentally believe that entrepreneurship can be used as a pathway for economic development and that it can be used by individuals and communities to change their own economic participation. I don't think that has to do with venture capital, right? Like it doesn't have to, it can, but it doesn't have to, right? Like I'm more in pursuit of the excellence of entrepreneurship. And so I think for me, what my passion is and what I hope to bring is this notion that like the working class, you know, across the board, whether that's like women, minorities, people from rural economies, can utilize entrepreneurship. Like we as a people, as a mass, hold the keys to our own liberation, whether that's social, political, or economical. Like we can create the tools and realities we want to see. And so my vehicle of doing that is through entrepreneurship. And so that's what I want to promote is the ability, and that's why I've been looking into the integrated capital stack, is like, how can we support more of the masses and meet them where they're at and be able to create many more individuals that are independently liberated when it comes to their own economic standing. And so I think that there's so many similarities, you know, between Hampton Roads and the community of Oregon or the community of Minnesota or the community of the Bronx. I think that we create a lot of divides between, you know, ourselves when it comes to like certain groups, but the plight of the working class, the realities of the working class are actually like very similar. And my goal is to be able to create unification among the working class and to be able to create upward mobility through entrepreneurship. And so that's what I plan to bring is more education, more resources, and then like a tailored ability to help more founders achieve their goals and especially like achieve the goals for their family, their community, and like relocalize a lot of the services and solutions we have.
So digging into that just a little bit deeper in terms of like, is there a particular event or something that you're thinking about doing here in the not too distant future?
You guys act like I don't know what you guys are talking about, but you guys are like laughing and like teasing each other like something's going on here. Like this is insider information. You guys don't even let me know. Like I thought I was a co-host. Tim, like, yeah, like this is ridiculous.
I'm just going off the sheet, Zach.
I'm looking at the sheet, but I guess I didn't scroll.
This is number two. Number two. We've been talking for 52 minutes. We're only on number 2.
That she likes to garden?
No, about upcoming Wealth Week.
Indeed. One on the gardening. I do like to garden. The effectiveness of that is still to be determined because most of the things end up dead. But the act of gardening is lovely. So maybe
if you could get, there's this thing, if you can, I think it's like $100, maybe 200. It's called Arrow Garden. Have you heard of these things? Yeah. It's hydro gardening. I can't remember what it is, but like they're these little pods. And my wife got it for me for Christmas last year. Badass. It also can be used as a nightlight if you're afraid of the dark. But it produces some pretty good plants, and then you can take them from there, move them outside. I'm a junior gardener, but I love that thing.
What is that? What is it called again?
I believe it's called an Arrow Garden. AERO garden.
Okay. I'll look into it because 0% have survived. But we're still, I think this is entrepreneurship, right? Like the first iterations or the first 10 iterations
It's
are
the
not.
power law.
Oh, this thing is like 100%. Like as long as you keep it with water in it, like it's golden. It's great. Like you can't screw it up.
Say 100% until I've tested it, because
if this idiot can get it to work,
we can. I will report back. However, to Tim's point, the other thing that we are actually collaboratively creating with other organizations, including Reactor and including Start Peninsula, right, of like these institutions that are pillars in the community, is the Hampton Wealth Week. And so that's something we're creating, where it'll essentially bring all types of different capital providers to the table to be able to talk about ways that you can think about building your own generational wealth, think about ways that you can sustain that, think about ways that you can have that be community-centered, relocalizing a lot of our solutions. And so that's something that we're building. If you're interested, number one, in being a partner on that, if you're a community organization, I think I'm very much a bottoms-up approach to change type of person. And so we very much love the grassroots efforts. And so if you are an organization that exists in the Hampton Roads area that wants to be a part of that, we'd love to have you. If you are interested in knowledge about decentralized finance, we'd love for you to participate. If you are an organization, like when we think about corporations or banks or other people that want to be able to support local economic development efforts, we'd love to hear from you as well. So, but this is very much not just something I'm doing, but something we as a community are doing. And that's how I aim to move, kind of moving forward, is how do we do things together?
I dig it. I look forward to it. And I like it when other people bring successful things that have happened to our area and force us to think about things in a different way.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's say it's this week that's coming up that you guys already knew about, because apparently Tim can read better than me. And you got a bunch of people in town and they're like, where can I go get something to eat? What is the number one spot that you're going to tell them to go to?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow. Well, this was an unexpected question. Okay. So it depends, I guess, on what type of food you're looking for. And you know what? This might be a little bit of a hot take, but I live by this place called Capri Pizza. Tim, Zach, do you know of it? But I actually have gone to many, many different pizza places, and I have to say, it's the best one I've been at.
Really?
In Hampton Roads, Capri Pizza. Yeah. It's so good.
Is it in Hampton?
It's in Hampton. It's right by the Fox Hill area.
Oh,
Right
okay.
by the theater that's there. There's like a whole plaza.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly good. I don't know what is going on inside that store, but it's been so good. I really, really enjoyed it. So I know that's like,
on my list.
But I don't know if you all have different takes on what is the best pizza, but I haven't tasted a better pizza in the Hampton Roads area.
New York is known for some good pizza.
I know. New York is, we really like miss a lot of times like the dollar pizza we can get in the Bronx. Also among New Yorkers, there's of course like a rivalry and a fight of where the best pizza is. I have to claim that it is from the Bronx. And not Manhattan, where most people are getting their pizza. The Bronx has exceptional pizza. And so for me to be like, Capri Pizza is really good, it's coming from a New Yorker.
Okay, so in the same vein, like New York is known for like the pizza, New York style pizza like that. Is there a food, a drink, a something of the region here?
Tim, what do you think?
But if you can't think of one like immediately, then that really is the answer. But with that, the closest thing we have the Orange Crush that I am willing to fall on my sword about the Orange Crush, because Delaware cannot claim that. I mean, it's
not ours. Delaware, it's Maryland, Ocean City,
Maryland. It doesn't even matter. Whatever other state wants to try to claim it, I think we have to claim the Orange Crush. But no,
They
that's the
are
thing.
they
Like
are
we're trying to
scary.
establish an identity for Hampton Roads, and we just
Yeah.
have to figure out what that is. And the white sauce at a Mexican restaurant, pick your favorite. That is not. That's just an accoutrement to the chips and salsa. You can't.
A
That's
what?
just.
Don't make me spell that. Oh my.
You know what? I will say
Accoutrement.
this is like one of the exciting pitches, right, that we heard yesterday. I got a chance to be on Start Peninsula's micro pitches yesterday, and I got to hear a lot of different pitches. But one of the pitches was about like, what is the identity of Hampton Roads, and how do
Yeah.
we infuse more art and culture to be able to build that identity? I think that's central for economic development, is to have
Yeah.
that we stand for.
Everybody wants to do their own thing. It's like instead of like everyone like that, you be the leader, and we're all going to push you up, and then we'll all rise up together. Yeah, we're trying to figure out what that one thing is, and one thing that I was watching Pulp Fiction the other night, and it was the opening scene in the restaurant, and they talked about the
Don't
Denver
ruin the movie.
omelet.
I've never seen it, Tim. Come on.
Well, they talk about the Denver omelet. I'm like, how did Denver get an omelet named after themselves? Like, man, somebody had to. That's pretty impressive. If they can do it with an omelet, then we can do it in our region.
So you think we got to put the name in it, like the buffalo wings,
Well,
the
there's.
Denver omelet? What makes a
Wait,
Denver
it
omelet
doesn't hurt
special?
to put the name in it, right? To put like the Hampton Roads something.
But then people would bitch about, well, that's just for this city, so it
But
can't
we
do
need to
that.
establish an identity of somehow we can all get behind, because this professional sports scene is not going to be anytime soon.
Yeah.
Food, drink, that's going to be the closer thing.
I will say that actually relates right back to entrepreneurship, because I think in the beginning, especially when you're trying to figure out what works, we can like spread ourselves so thin and be everything for everyone. But the way that you really like break through the noise and are able to like, kind of be known for something is to be like standing in something, right? Like, what is the identity? Like, what do you stand for? Who do you support? Why do you support that? Like, regardless of like if that appeals to the masses, that'll appeal to somebody, right? And like being able to like stand 10 toes down in what your identity is, like helps not just like entrepreneurs, but like from a city perspective too. It's all related.
I think that's a great way to end it. Himalaya, we appreciate it. It was a wonderful show. Looking forward to seeing you, in not a random elevator assembly sometime soon, I guess. Maybe at the week that you and Tim have been talking about that I should have read in the thing. But appreciate your time. This was lovely, and excited to see this continue on.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really
Thank you.
appreciate being on the show and just being around moguls of this particular Hampton Roads. Like you two are the pillars, and many have hosted many different things. I actually really appreciated getting to know more things that you all have been involved in, but this is what it takes, right? Like we can't become, a DC, a New York, a Texas without all of these things kind of coming together. And so I'm really excited for the innovation and like the roadmap that you all have built. And so really excited to build with you. So thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate you both.
And thank you for your support.